Hello and welcome to the second part of my Harris-Trump debate review. I hope you enjoy, and we get right into it. If you haven't watched the first part, there's a small portion in the beginning of the video where I introduce myself. I have been living in the US for several years, and now I give you my feedback. Enjoy! Last time we already finished a few questions for those candidates. They were basically talking about their policies or plans, but not in much detail. It was more about tax cuts and different things that happened during the last couple of years. And then abortion was a big topic, a very sad topic, and border control. And right now I think we will start with immigration.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you.
My big question here is right now, if they're undocumented and they're already found out about those 11 million, and supposedly the number is higher, but how do you know how much higher it is? And how do you know that there are those criminals? How do you know how many criminals are there? He must have some written proof, or is this all an assumption? I don't know. It's weird. And he brings up Venezuela, and Venezuela is, I think, currently under dictatorship. And there are, of course, official numbers that show, as far as I've heard, that crime is going down. But how much can you believe a system like that, where the person who is giving out the numbers is profiting a lot from those numbers, and there's no, I think, public organ or institution or mechanistic independent news that has gone through the process and got those numbers?
Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it.
I'm sorry that I'm laughing, but it's so crazy to think about it, like literally, that countries put people on the plane or into buses. I don't know, it depends from which country you're coming, and you take all the criminals to the US illegally. How is that possible? I don't think that's true. It can never be true. Oh man, if that would be true, then the whole American system, not only border control, police, everything, military, would not work at all. But it's working. So I don't know why he makes these kind of claims.
Because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's
I mean, I know why he's doing it, but there's no facts to it, in my opinion.
never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called
So put in the numbers and show us where it is higher, what specific crimes are higher, and show that it was measured by an institution or the local police itself that give out those numbers. It's important to prove your points, and everybody can say, oh, it's way up, it's all the way up. But what is the number? Is it up by 5%? Is it up by 10%? Is it lower 5%? Is it 2.4%? I mean, there has to be exact numbers, right? So that's what I wanted to say. And let's go.
migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the
I'll
FBI
give you
they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It's great that she didn't address it directly. On the other hand, I mean, it's good that she raises all those points because it's points that everybody wants, that everybody understands. In the end of the day, we have to see what happens with either candidate, but it's true, he might be convicted in November, and there's a couple of things going on about his person. Anyhow, this should not be, how can I say, this should not be the only point in the presidential race, but there is a whole story to it, and apart from his convictions or whatever things are coming up in court soon, his way of talking about those issues is very disrespectful towards the agencies. And if we have to see what the FBI report is about, I will also put in the number in the top or the report source, and then basically put the link down below. The thing is, there has to be proof of any kind, and if you cannot trust the government, if you cannot trust agencies like police, FBI, then whom can you trust? You cannot trust anybody, and that's very bad.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent, and I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the...
To be honest, I don't really care about those points. I don't care about the trials. I don't care which crimes are right now in question, how the cases came up. He's obviously maybe not truthful about it, but even if she's not truthful about it, it's about different things. It's not about him, it's not about his crimes. It should be about the American people. It should be about implying rules. It should be about being honest about numbers, do decent polling, do decent statistics, show the people what the numbers are, then show the people how you want to tackle those numbers, how you want to get back into the game, and what plans you have to create better jobs or better job conditions, or at least give relief of some kind to the people and make sure that the social system stays intact.
DA in New York, every one of those cases, and then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris.
He wants to talk about that again. So, oh man, this is so. It's kind of true, but I think it was also ruled that some of his crimes don't fall under the official business in the with the connection to the presidency. So everything public business, official business in linked to the presidency, I think he can get immunity for, but there are some private cases where this is not the case. So he can still be prosecuted, but that's at least what I heard of. But I'm not sure that this is final, because it's also the first time ever that a president got or will be convicted, or that there is a question like that to be raised before an election. And remember how he basically talked about Hillary Clinton, how he talked about Biden, also in terms of legal points. And yeah, let's see what happens. But as I said, those things should not matter too much. But of course, you should not use the system to get exonerated, to use the system to get immunity, to protect yourself for the next 4 years or more, to get control of the Justice Department and so on. But let's see what happens. It's more important to talk about the rest of the debate. But let's see what he has to say right now.
In your last run for president.
Weaponized, please.
We gotta
This is the
continue
one
here.
that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a
President
fake Russian.
But he was asking he was saying that America is basically in a decline, that there will be kind of, I'm just paraphrasing, anarchy, that there will be no control, there will be no jobs, it will be horrific, there will be fatigue and everything. He was raising those points.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up.
She's right about that. She also answered the first point about the fracking. I think fracking is not a very good technique. Maybe it's mandatory for some regions to get the energy sources they need, but it's devastating to the environment. It causes a lot of acidic waste, and it destroys the environmental surroundings, all the plants and everything. So that's not a very good technique. So they should invest more into alternative energies, and most and for all, as far as I know, and I have some comparison, they can improve. The problem is costs of housing, costs of building, cost of materials to build. Everything has increased so much. But if you work on insulation, make better windows, the walls, everything is so thin, and air can get through in most of the areas where I have lived in the US. So you can be much more effective with using less energy. But this is from a European perspective. So I understand that this is not possible at the moment in the US, but there are ways to improve, there are ways to save energy and then not rely on foreign oil sources. And also, there has to be a drastic change at some point, because oil prices will raise, gas prices will raise, but they have some reserves, they have underground resources they didn't touch yet, but they will touch them very soon. And they already did use most of the national oil during the COVID times, because the gasoline prices went up all that way, and then they counter that with using the national sources. But you cannot do this infinitely. And also, I want to go back. I will probably go back and listen to the question again, because I think there were like 3 points mentioned. She only answered one so far.
I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years.
But there's like a documentary about Trump and also his businesses, and he went bankrupt a few times. But also they are changing the numbers in the books, and everything is a little bit strange. And then they sell things, of course, and then they have banks who lend them money, and it's cross-finance and everything. So it's a little complicated. But as far as I know, he has also lost billions and billions of dollars, and also with his Las Vegas investment that completely failed. So there are many parts, or he has like so many, let's say, different businesses. Many go down, and you don't hear about it. But he still builds a big house, or he's selling, or he's renting out. But there's also always complaints about not paying bills, not paying lawyers, and stuff like that. So I don't know if this is still the case, but like 2 or 3 years ago, there were a lot of complaints like that. But then the media lost interest, I guess.
Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
What's wrong with him now? Did she say something? I mean, he should be over it and just finish his point, but let's see.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever.
Wasn't he the one who exonerated a couple of criminals back in the day. I have to check this Minesota reference, and I will put it in the top left and see what really was going on there.
Think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before.
I can see that this might be a threat to people because of the jobs and the industry. And in Europe, for example, there's a long tradition of coal mining, and now it's financed by the government because it's not affordable to have a business like that anymore, because you have to dig deeper, you have to go through more water that has to be pumped out, and there's a lot of other complications that raise, except especially the same as it's very similar to fracking in a way that fracking is the last resort to get oil out of resources when the traditional oil resources, like you can think of it like a room full of oil, has been pumped out, and then there's materials like earths, like different kind of materials that have oil inside, and then you want to wash it out, and that's what the fracking is. You use acids to get out the oil and get rid of the rest of the matrix, basically, and then this acidic waste matrix mixture has to be stored somewhere, and even wherever you store it or wherever you have it, you need a lot of water to dilute it down. The whole area around the fracking area is affected in some way or another. And also, you cannot catch all the acid. There's something going to the groundwater, and there's some going away when you perform those tasks. So that's what I just wanted to say about the fracking. But of course, there's parallels, as I said, to the coal mining in Europe, where this has no future, but there are jobs depending on it. So you have to make a plan and get alternative energies going, because it's right, you cannot just buy all the energy from outside sources that might be very expensive. Of course you can for some time, but you have to have a plan.
When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get to.
environment,
We're
as she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
That's a good question.
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never.
I have to look that up. As far as I remember, there have been police officers affected. I think 2 were killed, or at least close to death. There were injuries. Some of them basically lost their ability to speak or to walk because there were hits on their heads so drastically. But I have to look that up, and I will leave the reference in the top left because I'm just going from memory right now, which has been a couple of years ago. Um, and I will also put in some of the references where he is talking about to his supporters and how he talked to them, if I find them. And I think I cannot cover the full truth, but I can give you some idea what was going down. And I like that question in a way, but it's also a very sad day in that nation. It's a very sad day for democracy, and it should have never happened because he puts oil into the fire the whole time, and then you say, but do it patriotically and peacefully. I mean, if you already have them aflame, it's very hard to extinguish the fire.
Ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from...
But why is he jumping to that other point? He's like trying to deflect. He's trying to get rid of that topic. But I'm not saying that he put the people there, but he affected the people who were there on that day, and there's still rulings about that. So officially, we cannot say for sure. But there will be rulings about that in court. So let's see.
Countries all over the world, not just South America. They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And
he has to understand that I always go back to the internet and influencers and everything, but they have some responsibility. They are leaders, they are idols, and they have a lot of power, and people obey, or there's many people who try to do the best in the name of that person, and then they believe and they do things. And if you always talk about a certain topic negatively, they believe it's a negative thing, and even though it isn't, and then people might become more extreme in a way. I'm not saying that everybody gets that active, but people who already have the tendency, and there can only be a fraction, you know, if you have like let's say 200 million people, so we have 340 million people in the US. So if half of them are believing in you, it doesn't mean that everybody's running to the Capitol and tries to do something bad there. But if it's just 500 people, that's more than enough. That causes a big chaos, and it's just a tiny fraction, you know.
Crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. Might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
I mean, I think nobody could predict the outcome and the amount of violence happening on that day. And yeah, and I think I have to think about what was my point, but it's like how you're building up. It's not about that specific day only. You're building up that you don't believe in the system, that you don't accept the vote, except for if it is in your favor. Otherwise, it has to be fraud. Otherwise, it has to be based on false votes and false elections, false vote counts or whatever. So you are, as I said before, putting oil into the fire, and you're preparing this for weeks and months and days, and then on the final day you say, "But be peacefully." It's not 100% true that he just said that, but it's like he said that in some context, of course, but it was too late to stop them, I believe. Yeah, so let's continue.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand,
That's what I said. Some died, as far as I also remember. But as I said, I will put in proof.
the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say?
There are good people on both sides, he said. I just quote. It's not my opinion at all. It was really crazy how ignorant he is. And I think it's also based on his position and that he is untouchable, kind of. And yeah, I don't know.
There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, deep.
I will put in some proof again, where he talks about the election, this turnaround, and maybe this energy-related comments he made.
Debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what
So what does the southern border have to do with the Capitol storming on January 6th, 2020? What is the justification for anything linked to that topic? I don't get it.
I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border.
So he wants to distract from that topic, and he's raising a completely different topic and attacks her again about border control and so on. And this is a very strange move. It might be effective in convincing people or not make people think about what he's just saying, but it's really a not so good strategy if you want to be honest and if you want to be a good person, you know.
because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the...
But also, he basically killed the bill that would have increased border patrols and border control and personnel on the border by 1,500 people. So now he's making this argument the whole time. It's his best argument, apparently. So isn't that weak? I don't know.
Border is closed. All he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
But how can the border be closed? He didn't finish the wall. There are many open areas. There's too less personnel. So you cannot fully close the border, even if you close the border, you know?
Talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short. Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it.
Proof?
And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever.
But if he got the most votes, then Biden has gotten more votes, which are the most votes. And they already did some recalculations and testing in different states, as far as I remember, in that election, because there were complaints about it. But what came out of it was that there was no fraud, that there were only a handful of problematic votes, and that they didn't affect the outcome of the election at all. And also, I think he complained about early voters who did it by letter. There was another system that was digital. So he was at that time complaining about a lot of different systematic things, but they would have affected either both sides, in my opinion, Democrats and Republicans. So it wasn't like all the Democrats don't use that way of voting and all the Republicans don't use that way of voting. It's not true. Anyhow, let's go back to the talk.
And I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about it. An election is fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls.
But that's not too much, right? If I talk about 340 million people, and maybe it's more now because this number is like 8 years old, half of it would be 170 million people. So you basically got like less than a fourth of the nation's votes, which is not too much. And also the people who conduct the election, or the people who are taking part in the election, are less than 50% of the nation, which is very sad.
We need, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
That's untrue. And also, there's not an easy way you can vote. I'm speaking the language perfectly fine, and I was a local resident, and I couldn't vote anything. So there are rules in place. There are mechanistic things in place. You cannot just go to vote. And also, you have to be naturalized and not an asylum seeker to be able to vote. That's untruthful.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm. Lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have standing.
Fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have
All the statistics you take before the election, even if it's the best poll of all times, doesn't matter because the votes matter. That's why I said last time in the first part, this is just one tool. The debate is one tool. It happens 56 days before the election, so people might already forget about it. And many people are preset about Republican and Democratic voting and everything. And there's certain points that every family or individual wants to have affected, and then they might be already in one or the other camp because they believe in their candidate. So it doesn't even matter that much. And now the other thing I wanted to say is that the system in the US is like that. He was talking about 63 million people, 75, 70, 73 million people, I don't know. It doesn't matter how many people vote for you if you win certain states. So the system is based on electoral colleges, and there are some very few exceptions, but naturally, if the votes are a majority in a state, then the electoral college votes go from this state go towards the one candidate. For that can be any number. I don't remember exactly what the numbers are for each state, but there are states with lower numbers, let's say 3 electoral votes, and there are 7 electoral votes for other states and more. Okay, so if you get, I think the number is 216 or 217 votes from the electoral college, this is the 50-50 area, and if you get more, then you're the president basically. I think 216 would be a draw. And if one of the candidates has 217 or 218, he wins the election by a margin, but he wins the election. And it's not, you. For example, California is one of the biggest states and has also a lot of college votes. But saying on the grand scheme, if you have a 60-40 or a 95-5% vote, it's still the same number of electoral votes probably. So that's why I said, and some states have very few, a very low population, and then they also have less electoral votes. But in the end, it's not about the exact number of people that vote for you. It's about those electoral college votes that make the race.
have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
See, that's what I'm saying. So if he had 73 million votes and Biden 81 million votes, he is the president with the most votes in that election. I don't know from the top of my head if that's in history or whatever.
But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of...
Let's say it like that. They are still respectful in a way. I remember, for example, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Macron, the French person in power. They have not talked bad about him for the longest time. But since he always made false accusations and was very rude in meetings, and didn't oblige to some of the, let's say, formal etiquettes, or it's not about like how you hold your spoon or anything, but it's like how you talk to the people, how you do compromises. But he was not making any compromises. Of course, America first. We got that message, and that's true. That should be true for every nation. But when you make a contract, you cannot set all the rules and say, this is how we do it or we don't do it. And I don't remember the exact examples, but many leaders were then frustrated, or let's say they were also saying, okay, we don't depend on that rule. It will also affect America negatively. And then they were kind of laughing about him. It's like they're getting, you see, when a politician who's usually very neutral in front of the cameras, who doesn't show that much emotions, becomes emotional in a positive way, and starts smiling or something. That's weird. And they all knew that Trump will not be in office forever. Of course, some of his actions had consequences. He left some of the he left those kind of agreements, and he said America is out now. Okay, but then you can also not, be taken seriously by the people that you just left in other circumstances. And also, he was making a lot of false name calling and tax, or you frauded us, or whatever. Every nation tries to get their bills paid. Every nation tries to benefit, but usually it's a benefit for both sides. One person gets an item, one person pays for it, but then there's also another item that comes from the other nation, and so on. It's like a giving and taking and taking and giving, and it's not like somebody's just taking the whole time. That doesn't make any sense. But anyhow, let's go back to the topic of this debate.
Whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace.
The other thing is, he was talking so badly about the leaders, let's say Europe, it can be other ones, and then he praised Putin, he praised Xi, he praised other leaders that traditionally, from American view, were not anticipated allies or people or systems that the American people adore or worked with in the past. I mean, of course, every nation has their value, every nation has their traditions and should be taken seriously, but he was just choosing the wrong friends, kind of.
And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just
China
quoting
was
him.
afraid. I think they used him. Nobody was afraid. She got presidency for life, and he was saying, oh, I want that for me too. Putin was taking advantage of his kind of weak strategy to make America's needs omnipresent. He just said, okay, we'll do it. We will do it.
China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look.
I have to look up when this pipeline was built, because it has been in place for a long time before Trump was elected. I think there were some repairs, or there was a different one that goes through Ukraine right now. But I have to look that up and put in the references, and then you can read up on that.
Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes.
The minute is over.
They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, She was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
It's a very sad topic, and it already lasts for a lot of decades. It's not about this one incident or this one war. This war is on and off the whole time, since I was born, since people before me have been born. And it's a very sad, problematic thing, and it becomes normal for the people who live there. I have some connections to Israel, and it's just horrible for normal people to think about it. I don't want to say normal people, I just want to say people who don't live in that area, people who don't have an origin in that area. And it's so sad. Even if the two-state solution comes, there has to be security in a way that it's very hard to control Hamas or other institutions that have terroristic nature or that are extremists. And we don't know if that's possible even. I sympathize with the Israelis, but there's a lot of cultural and religious problems, or let's say also in Jerusalem and around the area. There's a lot of important sites for Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and that's where some of the conflict comes from, right? And as I said, I don't want to comment much more about it, but it's a very sad and long-lasting problem. It's a devastating on-off war for both sides, with a lot of fatalities, which are mostly normal citizens, and that's the sad part of it. And I'm not even sure you can end this. That's what I wanted to say.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed.
So first of all, this is a topic change again. We are talking about Gaza, and we're talking about Israel. So where does Putin come in right now? And also, Putin was a very strong leader. That's why he admired him. And he says, oh, Putin didn't do this, Putin didn't do that in public conferences, but also press conferences. But to me, it looked like Putin is not agreeing to anything. He's not moving his point, and I don't think he would have given in. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I don't want to comment on the Russian politics right now, but I don't think Trump could have affected him at all.
Millions of people, when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu.
So how can you know that somebody hate is one of the strongest words you can use for disapproval of the highest kind, and how can you say somebody hates something, and how do you have proof of that? That's again an accusation I really don't like, and especially in this cultural contents of Israel, Jews, Gaza, Christianity, maybe Muslims. That's very strong, man.
When he went to Congress to make a very important speech, she refused to be there.
Strong in a negative way, so it's actually weak to raise that point.
Because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about it.
So how do you come up with that? It's the same drastic negative point of view as he has raised in some of his rallies for America. We will go down, there will be collapse, nobody can buy eggs and bacon, everything will be like anarchy. It's like, oh man, dude.
That one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis.
I have to look up if there's any numbers that he's claiming that they have. The other thing is, same with inflation, the same with that kind of money, the same with anything like tariffs or restrictions you put on a country. This is always a dynamic process. It's never like, this is the baseline, it will always stay like that. It's like, it affects it strongly, then less strongly, then strongly, then less strongly. Then it maybe will fall apart. So you have to do discussions about that, and you have to renew the rules, you have to renew the sanctions, you have to look at the situation that changes. So there's also different kinds of income and everything. Of course, he's right. There might be more terroristic acts right now, but it's almost impossible to completely get rid of all the money, to get rid of all the support, and also those terroristic spheres, as he calls them, might not be even financed by the government or by some kind of money that is officially flowing in front of our eyes. It might be indirectly given through other sources.
And Yemen, look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is, it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, and it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
That's what I also think, that he admires their support, their strong men and leaders, and this gives him a false sense of security. That's at least my opinion.
And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak
She
on
caused
national
everything,
security
probably.
by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country.
168 different countries. That's almost all the countries in the world. And that is totally untrue. I think that's jibber jabber, that's lies. But I will also, I think the sources that I put in for the first part, they don't show exactly where the people are coming from, but I can have a look if there's any source.
Crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it.
But also, if I don't find any sources, there might be unofficial sources, or government sources that are secret, but I don't think that's the case. And he must have the numbers from somewhere, or he's just making it up.
Because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And
I think you also have to understand the local politics, and you have also to make amends to ensure peace and economic stability for different countries. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but you cannot just, let's say you put a lot of tariffs on Mexico all of a sudden, and you put a lot of fatigue and other things will happen from whatever you do to that country. Then the people from that country might be, or that government or the whole country might be unstable at some point. And especially if they have a different regime, if they have different worldviews, then they might even go against you at some point. And you have to ensure that this doesn't happen, that there's an economic stability, that there's satisfaction of some kind for each country. And also you have to always recognize, if it is Israel, if it is Palestine, if it is Russia, if it is Ukraine, they are always citizens, people who don't deserve what is happening. There's people who are innocent. There's people who are getting false information from sources they either believe in or they're afraid of, and it's unfair. The world is unfair, and you have to make sure that you try to do your best, even if it's almost impossible, to imply rules that get back some of that fairness, to give some relief, to give hope, to maybe one day. I mean, we cannot affect the government. We cannot affect. There shouldn't be an all-out war to change who's ruling in Russia or who's having the say in Israel and stuff like that. But you have to make sure that there is a probability for harmony, for economic growth for everybody, for jobs, for satisfaction. And then war cannot happen that easily. That's what I'm believing. Even though there's also, of course, traditional and religious and other conflicts maybe on the horizon, which are also having their effect on the situation.
And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with
That's
much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
So I will also take a break here. This is the end of the second part. Thank you for watching so far. If you have any questions, if you are not okay with some of my comments, please write down below, but be, let's have a discussion. Let's not be rude about it. And I understand that I might not have the complete insights in some situations, but I will do my best to put in the references. I hope I will see you back in part 3, and I hope that whatever the election will show us, that democracy will win, that the world will benefit from it, and we need a lot of more control in the world, which is getting problems all over the place, and situations getting worse. Economic problems are everywhere, and job losses and so on. So I hope the people tackle this. I hope people are honest, especially politicians in this case, and that America can strive again and get back on the field. I mean, now it looks like the outcome of COVID is getting more and more under control in terms of the economy, in terms of some of the inflation, and I hope this situation gets much better in the future too. But maybe people need to have patience, applying new laws and other things. There are some things that are affected immediately, but most of the time the good things take time. So with all that being said, I hope you have a nice day, stay healthy, take care, and maybe see you next time. Bye bye, your Cozy Fly.